Good morning and welcome to Peace Out, where we are all learning together to peace out, right? I hope you've had plenty of opportunities to put that to work in your life, because I know that God has met you in those circumstances and situations every single time. He never fails, right? And I got two examples this morning of times he did not fail those who looked to him. Isn't that what it's all about? We all have struggles. We all have different struggles based on our decisions, on our life decisions, on the way we handle money or situations or friends, relationships. All these different things come at us every single day, right? Or maybe that's just me. But it seems like every single day there's all these different opportunities to stop and say, am I going to believe what God said? Or am I going to believe what's being shoved in my face? Am I going to believe the truth? Or am I going to believe the lies? Am I going to fall for the deception? We have so many examples of people who fell for the deception. For instance, Eve. We didn't even get 3 chapters into the Bible, and we've got somebody being deceived by the enemy. And that's been his plot all along, to just get us off from the truth, from what God said, from what God promised us, from what he told us, just enough for us to miss it, right? Now, God redeemed that situation, right? It didn't surprise God. He didn't go, well, they messed up. I wasn't planning on that, and I don't know what to do. No, he knew they were going to mess up. He knew they were going to be human. He knew they were going to be just dust, or butt dust. Is what it says. He knows that we're just flesh, that we're just flesh, right? And he knows that. He knew that in his infinite mercy. He knew we were going to break his heart. He knew some of us were never going to follow him. He knew that people were going to be crazy, that they were going to be bent towards evil. Matter of fact, we only get 6 chapters into Genesis, and the world's already gone crazy, and God's going, to remind me why I did this? Somebody remind me why I did this. Their hearts were on evil continually. They didn't even want to hear the truth. It sounds like I'm describing today, right? People don't want the truth. They want to have strife. They want to have hate. And even when they're saying they don't want hate, they're saying it in a way that stirs up strife and hate. It's a crazy place we live in, but it's not much different in Genesis, 6, 7, and there were no other days. Matter of fact, that's mentioned. You know what? That's mentioned in Matthew 24, that as it was in the days of Noah, it would be right before the very end of all, when Christ is going to come back. We're going to live in his eternal kingdom forever. So we're a mirror of what they had. This is nothing. What we see today is nothing new. It's just that we have it on live on Facebook, and we can scroll it, and it's in our face, and it's on TV, and we broadcast it. They had this much wickedness, and they didn't even have technology to share it with one another. That's how bad it was back then. So maybe it's not. No, it's probably just as bad, right? But God knew all that. He didn't say, Eve messed up. Now what am I going to do? Adam went right there. He was with her and didn't stop her. Didn't say, wait, let's go ask. Man, there's so many things that we could stop or change if we just asked God. Now, let me say this. If we don't ask him first and we get ourselves in a bind or make a big mess for ourselves, then what? We don't get any peace anymore? We don't get any grace anymore? We don't have any mercies anymore? No. Actually, it's best to pray beforehand. It would have been better if Eve had said, okay, God, hold on, let me go ask him what he said, because I want to make sure I got it right. But she didn't, right? Neither did the 2 people I want to talk about today, Samson, Jonah. If they had prayed beforehand, they wouldn't have gone through the messy stuff, but it wouldn't have been as good of a story either, right? But we got to have the conflict is what makes the story interesting, and the resolution of that conflict. That's the part. If the resolution of the conflict isn't right, the story is bad. Who wants a bad ending? I thought Castaway had the worst ending at first. Later, after I thought about it, I thought, okay, it was the best ending. But it didn't seem like the conflict was resolved, but not in the right way, it felt like, right? And it left me leaving something more. Now, I ended up thinking about it, and I was okay with it. But the whole issue is that there's going to be a conflict, and we don't have a good story. But there's got to be a resolution of that conflict to make it a really good story, right? And so we look at Samson and Jonah, and we go, man, they messed up so bad. We have so many people. I talked about it yesterday. Now, this book is full of imperfect people who trusted God. We are imperfect people. I mess up so much. I mess up so many things. I mess up so many times. I'm a mess, right? But God does not throw us away. And so both of these stories, in Samson and in Jonah, the thing I thought about this morning was how both of them messed up, right? But then in Judges 16, Samson has been taken captive because he talked to the wrong person. He got deceived. He chose Delilah's looks over his promise from God, or so it seemed, right? And it says that they took him captive. They put him in chains. They poked his eyes out. What a horrible thing to go through. What a horrible thing to go through. And back then they were so barbaric. I mean, at least if they were going to do it now, maybe they would be a little more humane. There's no humane way to do that, right? And so here he is. He's blind. He's lived as a slave. They've made fun of him. We talked about that a little bit yesterday. But then it says in verse 28, then Samson prayed to God. Then Samson prayed. And then guess what? Right after that, within 5 minutes, God fulfilled the promise he'd given Samson, the prophecy that he'd given Samson and to Samson's parents. He's going to begin to wipe out the Philistines. And then, so after Samson prayed, that was a pivotal moment. And then he tells the little boy, he says, take me over, because remember, he can't see. He says, take me to the pillars. I just want to feel the pillars. Right. And so, and he pushes them, and they're holding up the whole structural system of the theater or the amphitheater, whatever you want to call it, where they were. And when he pushes those two, his strength had returned, and he didn't know it. He didn't even know it, right? And he pushed those pillars, and the whole building caved in. And it was a pivotal moment when Samson prayed after he had messed up. He had messed up, but he prayed, and God turned it around. But wait, let's go with Jonah, because Jonah, I love Jonah. I'm fixing to do a little Bible study on Jonah, so you might watch for a Bible study guide later. But and I've already started studying it more in depth. I love Jonah because I can relate to Jonah on so many levels. But when God said go to Nineveh, he said, Nineveh's that way, I'm going that way then. And he went the total opposite direction. He on purpose said, I don't want to do what you told me to do, God. Rebellious, disobedient, find any of those negative words. But what happens right here in chapter 2, it says, here he is in the belly of the fish God prepared for him. Now, that means it wasn't a regular fish. God prepared a fish to catch Jonah and take him back the other way so he wouldn't have so far to walk after he repented, right? But in chapter 2, it says, then Jonah prayed to the Lord from inside the fish. Then Jonah prayed. So in Samson's case, both of these guys messed up, and we read their stories and go, they were terrible people. How many times do we mess up? How many times do we know I shouldn't do this? If you ever start anything, I'm working on this because I do this all the time. But if you ever start a sentence or an action with, I shouldn't do this, but make that little conjunction, but the turnaround word and go, I'm not going to. But so many times we'll say, I shouldn't do this, and then we go ahead and do it. And we just told ourselves we know we shouldn't do it. We're just like Samson. Samson's kind of like, I know I shouldn't go with Delilah, but she's a foxy lady, and I want her, right? Jonah's like, I know I should go to Nineveh, but I don't want to. So he went the other way. So if you ever precede something by saying, I shouldn't do this, but don't do it. I don't know, sometimes in conversation we'll say, I shouldn't say this, but then don't. Just say, I really just shouldn't say this. That's the abundance of your heart speaking through your mouth, trying to warn you and stop you from doing something dumb, right? So if we would just listen more, if Samson had listened, if Jonah had listened. But here's the thing, they didn't. They rebelled. They looked like they messed up what God planned. But can I tell you, you are not big enough and bad enough to mess up what God planned. You can't make God go, oh, never mind. Forget it. I didn't mean it. Let's do something else. We aren't big enough and bad enough in our finite brains to mess up what God planned, what he wrote before we were ever born. And like it says in Psalm 139, we can't. But in the middle of the circumstances, Samson and Jonah both had just said, I want to do exactly the opposite of what God said. And in both of their situations, it says, then they prayed. Then Samson prayed, and God brought about the promise. Then Jonah prayed, and then he did what God told him. And Nineveh repented. What a wonderful outcome. There's more to that story we'll have to talk about later, right? But what a wonderful outcome. A whole city repented like nobody has ever seen or heard since. The whole city didn't eat or drink. They didn't let their animals eat or drink. They had true repentance like we don't even understand. Because Jonah, in the belly of the well, where he was there because he rebelled, said, okay, God, we need to talk. So no matter how dark it is for you right now, no matter how difficult it is for you right now, let your story read, then Jeannie prayed. Then this person, then they prayed. And God came. God answered. God redeemed. God turned things around. God fulfilled the promise. God finished the prophecy. Right? All those things because they prayed, even though they had messed it up themselves. They stopped, they prayed, and God answered, and He will answer you too. Guaranteed. I promise. Right? That's why we can peace out. Peace out. Have a great day. See you again tomorrow.